we humans have the gift of language just by making noises, hisses, and pops with our mouths while exhaling. We can send pressure waves through the air, and these pressure waves then magically create ideas in other people's minds, right? So I can say something like, imagine an ovulating zebra riding on the back of a rhinoceros while solving differential equations. And hopefully, if everything has gone well in your life so far, you've never had that thought. And now you've just had that thought for the first time just because I made those pressure waves travel through the air. Now, there's not just one language, of course, in the world. There are about 7,000 languages spoken around the world, and all the languages differ from one another in a huge variety of ways. Some languages aren't even spoken. They're sign languages. Languages differ in vocabulary and the kinds of grammatical structures they require. And there's a long-standing question, and by long-standing I mean thousands of years. Do the languages we speak shape the way we think? So Charlemagne opined on this. He said to have a second language is to have a second soul. Other people have argued the opposite. So for example, Shakespeare has Juliet say, "Oh, what's in a name? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet." So there have been arguments on this back and forth for thousands of years, and there's been almost no evidence of any sort either way. There are lots and lots of strong opinions. For a few decades in the last century, this topic became completely taboo and unstudyable in any scientific disciplines that are concerned with mind or language. But in the last couple of decades, there's been new work, new actual empirical work reopening this question. A lot of the work actually has been done here across departments, so folks in anthropology and psychology and cognitive science coming together to find interesting ways that language influences thinking. So let me give you, there's a broad body of work here, but let me give you some of my favorite examples. I'll start with the domain of space and navigation. And this starts with the work of John Hovland, who's here. John noticed that there are some languages that, unlike English, which English often relies on words like left and right, so we might say it's your left leg, your right leg, move your cup to the left. There's some languages that don't use body-centered terms like this, and instead they put everything in cardinal directions, like north, south, east, and west. So you say things like, there's an ant on your southwest leg, or move your cup to the north-northeast a little bit. Now, to speak a language like this, you have to stay oriented. You have to know which direction is which, just in order to be able to speak the language properly. And speakers of languages like this, in fact, do stay oriented, and they can perform navigational feats that we used to think were beyond human ability. So we used to think, well, you know, ants can dead reckon, but that's just because they have these reflective surfaces on their backs that measure the incident light from different celestial bodies. And birds can do it, but they have magnets in their beaks. That's why they can do it. We are biologically incapable of doing it. But in fact, it turns out humans are perfectly biologically capable of doing more than we thought we were. There are people in the world who can do it by virtue of the practice that language requires of them. And just so we can convince ourselves that we're not so great at being oriented, I'm going to ask all of you guys to close your eyes right now. So everyone, close your eyes and point southeast. Okay, you can open your eyes. I see points there, 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 there. I have no idea which way it is, but I think we can say the accuracy was not 100%, right? I think that's safe. Okay, so that's a big difference in cognitive ability, where you have relatively young children in one culture that can easily point southeast, and here we have a group of distinguished professors who can't do it, right? That's a big cognitive difference. Another domain where you find big differences like this is how we think about time. So across languages, we tend to use a lot of spatial language to create time. So in English, we talk about the best ahead of us, the worst behind us. We also use our writing direction to organize time. So it might be very common for an English speaker to organize time from left to right. Of course, if you're a Hebrew or Arabic speaker, you might think that time goes from right to left. If you don't have left and right in your language, and you don't use those ideas in your culture, you might actually orient time from east to west. So I've done some studies like this showing people who orient themselves in absolute space tend to orient time in absolute space as well. Time can also reverse on the front-back axis, so we think of the future as ahead of us and the past as behind us, but work by Rafael Nunez here in cognitive science shows they put the past in front of them and the future behind them. You see this pattern in the metaphors and the language, and you also see that in the way people use their bodies, the way they gesture when they're talking about the past and the future. So those are big differences. There are also pretty languages. Let me give you an example. Some languages don't have exact number words. Some languages have only words like one, two, and then few and many, and some don't even strictly have one and two. And not too surprisingly, speakers of languages like that don't keep track of exact numbers. They don't have algebra. They don't do any of the things that would be required to build a room like this, for example. And so that's a deep difference, because a simple thing like having count words in your language opens the door to a whole lot of other transformative cognitive abilities that can really change not just the way you think, but also your material culture and the way you communicate that material culture and build on it. There are lots of other examples, the way people make even simple decisions about colors, whether or not people think bridges are masculine or feminine, whether they're strong or beautiful, depends on grammatical genders in the language. There are differences in eyewitness memory. How likely are you to remember who did what? Depends on how you're likely to describe the event. These studies suggest that each language comprises its own cognitive toolkit, a set of instructions that speakers of your language in generations past have created for you, a set of ideas and tools that have been honed and fine-tuned over generations. Some of the languages in the world may provide very similar toolkits, others will be very different. But I think what's important about this is that linguistic diversity is a real testament to the ingenuity of the human mind, right? That our minds have the exquisite capacity to create not one pass at the physical universe that we're all trying to describe, but 7,000 different passes. There's not one linguistic universe, there's 7,000 universes. And we're able to create many more. We're constantly changing our languages and fine-tuning and honing them more. Now, linguistic diversity is still vastly underexplored. We've only scratched the surface, and I think this is a perfect topic to bring together perspectives from lots and lots of domains. Obviously, expertise on language, on cognition, that exists across the university, and bringing more folks together to address this issue, I think, would be wonderful. Thank you.